What's up, Bills Mafia? Tilt here, riding solo with you tonight. Judge has his adult responsibilities. We're covering all the things from a wild roller coaster day and big Bills win in Orchard Park yesterday against the Miami Dolphins. We'll take you quickly around the AFC playoff picture. We'll cover our typical data tracking and complementary football stats, and as well as our who's up and stock down, as we always do. But first,
Welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in everyone to the Air Raid Hour Victory Monday show presented to you by the Cover One Network and Picasso's Pizza. I am your host, Tilt Money. You can find me on Twitter at Tilt Money. Riding solo tonight without Judge in the co-pilot seat, as he has some responsibilities to take care of tonight. Tried to go with a little bit of a different aesthetic as the solo host tonight. Got some stats up there for you, the AFC East standings as well. So we're going to get into everything tonight, of course, after the Bills' big win against the Miami Dolphins in Orchard Park yesterday, and what came down to a 61-yard game-winning field goal from the maligned Tyler Bass, who during the game did make a couple other field goals, but had some interesting adventures, I would say, on his extra points. So we'll get into all of that and more as we start to kick off the show tonight. Probably be about a 45-minute show tonight without Judge, and we'll just kind of see how things go. And I want to kind of really rely on the comment section tonight for some good interaction and good conversation tonight as we start to kind of look around the status now of what the AFC playoff picture is about to look like tonight, with the Chiefs right now currently losing to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers early in that game. So a lot on the line here as we head into the second half of the season. So let's quickly go around the league and some news and notes, not just from this Bills game, but really from around the league and what was an interesting day in the NFL, starting with Thursday night and the Jets beating the Texans in a game where I think a lot of people maybe were torn on who to root for. Root for the Texans, bury the Jets down even further in the division, or root for the Jets to beat the Texans team that beat the Bills a few weeks ago and was ahead of the Bills in the AFC standings. Now find themselves behind the Bills in the AFC standings, as the Bills currently sit in second place in the AFC, only behind the Kansas City Chiefs, with the Steelers idle this week on their bye. And as Eric comes in and says, didn't know Keon injury was as bad as it possibly could be. We don't really know a whole lot right now, and that's what we're going to cover in part of this news and notes, is Sean McDermott's press conference today. He didn't have much to add on the Keon Coleman injury. He said it's going to still be evaluated. He didn't know what the long-term prognosis was going to be for that injury, as opposed to what he shared around Dwayne Smoot, who will be placed on IR, who will have surgery on his wrist. It did, I believe Alex Brasky asked Sean McDermott if there was a possibility of him, Dwayne Smoot, that is, coming back this year, and he said yes, but wasn't ready to say for certainty that Smoot would be back. Keon Coleman, on the other hand, we don't really know what the severity of the injury is, whether it's going to be something that doesn't keep him out long, or potentially, worst case, maybe ends his season. We just don't know at this stage. It's still being evaluated, so we will see. And kind of speaking on that, continuing just on that topic around the injuries, Sean McDermott did say that both Amari Cooper and Reggie Gilliam, with their own injuries, wrist injuries, are day-to-day and will be evaluated here in the coming days and this week in practice. So a lot of guys with wrist injuries, all seemingly of varying severities. And so we will just have to see kind of how it plays out this week for Amari Cooper and Reggie Gilliam. Now, if the Keon Coleman injury does prove to be serious and he, let's say, misses this Colts game or even beyond, it certainly would be imperative to have Amari Cooper back in the mix this week as he used day to day and really described by Sean McDermott as 50-50 to play this past game. And we hope that he is back, of course, for this week. Kind of going quickly back around the rest of the AFC and sort of what transpired yesterday in the league as far as teams in legitimate sort of legitimate playoff mix. We saw the Chargers beat the Browns in pretty convincing fashion. That Chargers defense is legit. We saw the Ravens win big against I guess maybe you could say a surprising 5-3 Broncos team who now drops to 5-4, but nonetheless, that Broncos team, definitely came out flat, and you could tell they weren't quite ready for that game against a really Super Bowl contending Ravens team, and so the Broncos drop down to 5-4, find themselves now third place in the AFC West, but still, a playoff contending team. And then we saw the Colts lose last night to the Minnesota Vikings, which in, an inter-conference game, I should say, is not a huge deal, but does knock the Colts down below 500, the team that the Bills will be playing this upcoming game. So of note, of course, there, Joe Flacco, the starting quarterback now for the Colts, which seemingly is going to be the case for the foreseeable future, a team that the Bills will see this week. So as I mentioned, the Bills now find themselves in second place in the AFC, with the Chiefs still the only undefeated team in the NFL and currently in that driver's seat in the AFC. And RJ comes in and says, hopefully Coleman isn't hurt that bad, but the news doesn't sound good. And I think that's the tough thing about sort of what the tone, I guess, or the message today from McDermott was the uncertainty, right? There wasn't that assurance given that he would be back soon or even in a couple weeks, like there was when he was asked about Smoot, saying he thought a possibility of Dwayne Smoot coming back this year. He did not know enough about the Coleman injury yet, as it's still being evaluated. As far as the rest of the game, there were no other major injuries reported that I was aware of. That was covered today in those press conferences. And so we just wait now for the news on Keon Coleman. Obviously, with Dwayne Smoot going on the IR, with Dwayne Carter already on IR, that Bills defensive line banged up a bit. They did get reinforcements back this week with Von Miller, who looked pretty solid, I thought, in his return, and we'll get to that as well. But that defensive line, a bit banged up, and I think that's where a lot of people are kind of leaning as far as if the Bills were going to go out tomorrow before the trade deadline to make a move, is that an area where they would address? Joseph Day is a name that's being thrown out around a lot. Would the Titans be willing to move a guy like that? And RJ says, I've never seen a team get this injured consistently. And it makes zero sense. And it's like kind of interesting, right? Because 2023, we saw this team, marred with a lot of injuries. In 2022, they were fairly fortunate on the injury front. And also we saw last year the offensive line as a unit start every game together. But obviously the defense especially faced a ton of injuries last year, and it was just too much to overcome when it ended up being that crunch time moment in that playoff game against the Chiefs. So let's hope that Coleman is back. Let's hope that, maybe Smoot does come back. Yeah, you're right, RJ. It wasn't 2022. It was 2021 that they got lucky with the injuries. It was not 2022. So that's my mistake there. But let's see on this Coleman injury, and we'll kind of come to that as we start talking about this game a bit more. But as I said, big win for the Bills yesterday. We needed that win. We talked in the pregame about them burying this Dolphins team in the division, and look, and Sean McDermott said it in his press conference today, there are many ways to win. And he used the word trait when describing it's a good trait to have as a team, as far as finding different ways to win, not always winning in the same style. And so, as Claude says here, guessing it's a wrist injury. Yes, it is a wrist injury. We do know that. We just don't know the extent of it now. So, Bills win on the Tyler Bass game-winning field goal. And, as we start to talk about the one big thing from this game, I want to hear from you all and kind of what you felt was the one big thing coming out of this game. And for me, I think there are a lot of things you can point to, but I think for me, I just don't know how you can not say the one big thing in this game was the Tyler Bass field goal and Tyler Bass in general at the end of this game, kicking that 61-yarder, longest field goal in Bills history, and an absolute bomb, like would have been good from probably 65, 67, maybe even close to 70 yards on that kick right down the middle. And in a game where he himself saw his own ups and downs, made a long 49-yard field goal, made a 40-yard field goal, made that 61-yard field goal. So he made all of his field goals, missed an extra point that he kind of pulled left, which has been his issue, really. Most of his misses have been to the left, and then had another extra point that almost also missed left that went in after hitting the upright. So an eventful day for Tyler Bass, but you really could tell in the locker room with him and the way McDermott sort of started that locker room speech, and then Tyler Bass getting super emotional, afterwards, that how much that meant to him and how much his teammates really picked him up, right? You could tell from the moment he knew that kick was going in, how everyone was reacting on the sideline. Really a good moment for Tyler Bass. And look, I have my thoughts on sort of the approach there at the end of the game, letting him kick that field goal. And I want to get your thoughts on this too. And just the Typica News says great snapshot of the season thus far for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I have a thought, and I want to hear what you guys think about this take. Tyler Bass, they trot Tyler Bass out there at the end of the game. There's 10 seconds left. Miami Dolphins had 2 timeouts still at that point. You're kicking from what, the 44, the Dolphins 44. So you're pretty much at almost at midfield there. Um, I think that you trot well, McDermott talked about the options. For one, you can't punt, right? In that situation, I think that a punt is pretty much admitting that you're going to overtime. Um, I would have I would have had a hard time accepting a punt in that situation and not at least attempting the field goal. You could go for it. It wasn't a good down and distance, and it wasn't really a good situation to go for it either because you don't have any timeouts left, right? So your option in the message you send to the team to go and trot Tyler Bass out there and Hail Mary, that's fair. That was an option, and I didn't love that option either because it's such a low percentage. You trot Tyler Bass out there if you're Sean McDermott, knowing, hey, uh, if he misses this kick, right, the Dolphins have 5 seconds left, and they probably have to get another 15 or so yards in 5 seconds to try a field goal of their own. We've seen the Bills defense. Maybe that's likely, maybe that's not. But you also kind of go out there a little bit with house money because I don't think a lot of people, how many people were expecting Tyler Bass to make that kick? Very few. And maybe even Sean McDermott in his own mind was not really expecting him to make that. Do you really expect any kicker to make a 61-yarder? Probably not. But I felt like it was kind of, a good situation for the Bills to send Tyler Bass out there because if he misses, you're probably going to overtime anyway. And maybe you didn't expect him to make it, but you give him the shot, you give him a chance to win it. And if he does make it, you look like you made the right decision, giving him the chance. He did make 2 longer-ish field goals earlier in the game. So to me, I thought it was a good, smart decision by Sean McDermott to try the field goal there, and ultimately it did pay off. And for me, that's why I'm putting Tyler Bass and sort of everything that kind of happened leading up to that with his season so far. And then obviously the post-game speech afterwards with the team kind of rallying around him as my one big thing. So for me, it was Tyler Bass as my one big thing for this game. Uh, as we start to kind of transition now into the data tracking portion of the episode, we can talk a little bit more about, and let's just talk about this really quick. Thought that the Ray Davis play turned the game around. The Bills never were down again after that point. That's true. That was after the Dolphins had taken the lead on a field goal to go up by one because Tyler Bassett missed the extra point. Ray Davis gets that touchdown, and the Bills get the 2-point conversion. And at that point, they were never losing the game. The Miami had come back and tied it twice after that, but they never lost the lead after that. I also agree with Seth here. I think it had been less pressure on Bass with it being so far out because there's not the expectation that he's going to necessarily make it. So in a way, it was maybe even less pressure on him. So I agree with that. Okay, so as we do every week, and Judge typically leads this segment, but manning the ship this week, we're getting into our data tracking. And the first area we always look at here is the complementary football tracker. So we look at time of possession, we look at average starting field position, and we look at turnovers and how the Bills fared against their opponent in these three categories. So the Bills actually lose the time of possession battle in this one, 31 minutes 53 for the Dolphins, 28:07 for the Bills. So fairly even split. And as you kind of start to go through the box score really here and the team stats, it is a fairly even split in pretty much most of the statistics here. Yards, first downs, time of possession here slightly favors the Dolphins. Average starting field position. This was an interesting one because I went back and charted through all the different, all the different starting field position that the teams had. And it was actually kind of crazy to see that the Bills started with a touchback on 7 of their possessions that they had it. And in the one possession where they did actually start in Miami territory was on the very first punt return of the game from Miami on Codrington's punt return that he took over to the Miami 37, averaging out the Bills starting field position to their own 35 after basically starting every other drive on their own 30. So the Codrington punt return to put the Bills on Miami side of the field was actually the only drive starting possession for either team that started in opponent territory in this entire game. So, yeah, can we petition to get the INT on Keon's record? Yeah. It's crazy to think. And actually, Rex Ryan made this comment today on Get Up was Josh Allen's 2 interceptions this year were on Amari Cooper running a slant route where he fell over, and then another throw where he hit Keon Coleman in the chest, basically, and it bounced in a ricochet into Jalen Ramsey's hands. But in any case, the Bills start on their own 35 as their average starting field position. The Dolphins on their own 24. So the Bills win this. Bills, like I said, were the only team that had a single possession starting on the opponent's side of the field with that contradicting punt return. So the Bills win the average starting field position battle, in large part to that and to the essentially the interception, which forced the Miami Dolphins to start on their own 3-yard line. Otherwise, these teams essentially traded touchbacks after each score, and so those few possessions where you would feel like the team would get an advantage or a disadvantage, Miami ends up scoring on their possession where they started pretty deep in their own territory, and the Bills, the Bills score a field goal on the possession where they start on Miami's side of the field. So the Bills have the advantage there on the average starting field position, and then turnovers were 1 apiece. Obviously, we talked about the Josh Allen interception that bounced off Keon Coleman, and then the fumble giveaway by Raheem Mostert in the Dolphins on Taron Johnson's peanut punch. So turnovers even in that. So on the complimentary football tracker, it was 1-1-1-1-1. You had the Bills losing time of possession, but winning starting field position, and then a tie in turnovers. So 1-1-1 on the complimentary football tracker. That makes sense. Even game throughout. And you see this split now in our complimentary football tracker, 1-1-1. Now, as we get to the toxic differential tracker, which we chart 10+ yard runs, 16 plus yard passes, and turnovers again. We see on 10 plus yard runs, the Dolphins had 4, the Bills had 3. So the Dolphins win that one. And also, we know we had the Josh Allen 21-yard touchdown run nullified due to that holding penalty. Otherwise, the Bills really would have had a tie here in this one, 4-4. But ultimately, the Dolphins win this one 4-3. And 3 of the Dolphins' 10-plus yard runs came on that 97-yard touchdown drive. Started out with 2 Raheem Mostert 10-plus yarders, and then they had a De'Von Achane 10-plus yarder later on. Claude comes in and says, I thought the cringiest moment was Tua diving headfirst for a first down, is followed by the funniest moment, 3 Bills defenders trying to avoid Tua. Yes. Yes, Jessica, that imaginary holding penalty. And I'm going to talk about that here in a second. That holding penalty, and those 2 holding penalties, and then the Taylor Rapp penalty, which should have been a penalty probably on Raheem Mostert for lowering the head. Otherwise, the Bills only had 1 penalty in this game. They only had 4 penalties for 40 yards, 3 of which were very questionable penalties. The 2 holding penalties on that same drive, the Rapp personal foul, which should not have been. And then their only other penalty was one where they jumped off sides on a 3rd down that would have brought up a 4th down, but they jumped off sides and gave the Dolphins a first down. That was truly a penalty. They did jump off sides for that one. But the Bills' penalty woes from the past couple games, the Jets and Seahawks notably, were greatly improved in this game with only the 4 penalties for 40 yards. And in reality, really probably should have only been 1 penalty in the game for the Bills. So as an aside there, I would just say the Bills did a much better job in managing the penalties and reducing the penalties in this game. And Jessica comes in and says Spencer Brown was graded as the highest team, by the way, for PFF. That's true right there. And RJ comes in and says Trey Blake was absolutely trying to keep the game close. Even Spencer Brown spoke up about how bad Trey Blake's crew was. And yeah, I didn't necessarily think that it was a good or well officiated game, but it was nice to see that the Bills were penalized less. It sucked that the couple that they were penalized on were pretty big penalties and took points off the board. On the other side, the Dolphins got that unnecessary reference on Jordan Poyer at the end of the game, which clearly was a penalty, should have been, and then the holding on Khalil Shakir in the end zone, which gave the Bills a chance to get that touchdown to Quentin Morris. So I think overall it somewhat evened out. The Dolphins had twice as many penalties as the Bills. Obviously, some penalties are more impactful than others, but in the end, the Bills were a bit more disciplined in this game and really shouldn't have been called for many of those penalties. So 10-plus yard runs, the Dolphins win that one 4-3. 16-plus yard passes, the Bills narrowly edge out the Dolphins here 5-4. And since we do track 16-plus yard passes, it's probably worth noting as well that Dalton Kincaid had a 15-yard reception that was not counted in this total, and Khalil Shakir had a 13 and 14-yard reception that was not counted here. On the flip side, Mostert had a 15-yard reception, and Jonnu Smith had a 15-yard reception that were not counted in these totals. But either way, the Bills do edge out the Dolphins here in 16-plus yard pass completions. And then the turnovers we mentioned were 1-1. So again, -1 on the 10-yard runs, +1 on the 16-yard passes, and even on the turnovers. The toxic differential tracker ends up being a 1-1-1 split as well. So complementary football tracker 1-1-1, toxic differential tracker also 1-1-1. All adds up to essentially the game coming down to that Tyler Bass field goal attempt, a very close game throughout. So interesting that it definitely felt like the Dolphins had, their fair share of toxic chunk plays, and they did, having the 8 4 run 4 pass. The Bills had some of their own as well, 3 runs and 5 passes, obviously highlighted by that huge play to Ray Davis, right? The 63-yard touchdown pass. So Justin Tippecanoe comes in and says, Miami played a good game. Hats off to them. It's nice to know we didn't play our best, but still got the W. And I think that's I like that comment from Just the Tip of Canoe because I feel like that was something that people on social media today kind of rallied around a little bit. Bills Mafia is they're very opinionated, and even though we're all part of the same family, what ends up happening is you have different opinions. You want the best for the team, and some people think, well, the Bills really didn't play a great game on defense, or the whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, if they didn't play their best game and they still got the win against a team that was desperate, against a team that had their starting quarterback back, against a team that the Bills really struggled to defend, um, especially the running backs out of the backfield. And we'll get to that here in a bit. The fact that Miami played a good game and the Bills were still able to manage to get the win, uh, it shows a lot to me because this is a game that really all the pressure I think was on the Bills in this game. I don't think Miami had a lot of pressure on them coming into this game. They were already 2-5. I think a lot of the expectations for the Miami Dolphins had subsided for what was going to be this season. The pressure on the Bills to beat a team that they really were expected to beat at home, uh, an undermanned Dolphins defensive front, an undermanned Dolphins defense as it was, and really the silver lining or the hope for the Dolphins was that they had Tua back for this game, it's a second full game back, and the Bills still managed to get the W. And RJ comes in and says that had to be the worst game of defense since Baltimore in the first half of the Houston game. I actually think there is a systemic issue with this defense. And this is something that we've been talking about for several years now, right? Where we start to look at things like DVOA and statistics that show the Bills defense is good and they've been good against the run and they've been good against the pass. They've obviously been very good against or they've been very good at turnover differential, came into the game as the number one turnover differential team in the league. And I think that's part of the equation here is that they have given up chunk plays. They haven't been very good at defending running backs out of the backfield. And really, up until this game, they had been pretty good about keeping teams out of the end zone and forcing turnovers. And I think when you start to think about like giving up yards and giving up third downs, which they haven't been good at defensively either, but they have been managing to win these games because they've kept teams out of the end zone and they've created turnovers. That's really, I think, been a storyline for this Bills defense really this year and in years past. So I get what RJ is saying because we're going to get to that here in a bit in the stock down section about defending running backs, especially in the passing game. But um, they did force the turnover when they needed to get some momentum, and really they would have had another stop had they not jumped off sides. So interesting. Uh, Ralph Wilson Sr. comes in and says Jones and Oliver got manhandled. I I somewhat agree with Jones. I'm not ready to say that Oliver got manhandled. If you go back and you watch, you'll see that Oliver was getting into the backfield quite a bit. He was getting double teamed quite a bit. He didn't really have a huge impact, I would say, from a box score standpoint, but Tua was getting the ball out quickly. He was getting in the backfield fairly quickly if you go back and watch some of those reps from Oliver. I'm not saying like he was lights out or had some major impact in the box score, but I didn't think he played a terrible game. Jones, on the other hand, I'll have to go back and reconfirm, but I did feel like he was getting moved around quite a bit. And I didn't think he had his best game. Jessica comes in and says, Bills had to respect Waddle and Hill first and then worry about everyone else. No other team has this worry for the Bills. Yeah, and De'Von Achane, we said, was the respect you player, at least for me, going into that. So I definitely felt like he did his damage, and he scored the 2 touchdowns and had all those catches out of the backfield. So we're gonna get to that in a bit as we kind of transition now to a little bit more positive tone in our stock up section here. Really, we can go a lot of places here with the stock up. I mean, I'm going to start with Josh Allen here again. I thought that last week in Seattle, he played a really good game, and I thought he played another good game against the Miami Dolphins. The interception, obviously, was not his fault. Through 3 touchdown passes otherwise. He continues to make good decisions. Every game is going to have its fair share of plays where they're kind of like either forgettable or throw away. There were a couple of times where he did have to throw the ball away or throw the ball at the receiver's feet because there was just nothing there. And those are ones where you just live to see another day. And that's something I think that has shown as an evolution of Josh Allen this year, where he really has protected the football and made a lot of better decisions this year than he has in years past. He played a clean game. I know he had the interception, but he did play a clean game. Only took the 1 sack and then the one not so great third down kind of quarterback sweep play, which really wasn't on him. There was no blocking there and there's nothing he could really do. So another good, clean game from Josh Allen. 3 touchdown passes, contributed a bit with his legs. Should have been more, obviously, without without the penalties, but did have a big run on that same drive that happened before the penalties. So another big game from Josh Allen. Definitely next on the list is just the tip of canoe says Ray Davis stock up again. Look, he continues to make an impact when he's called upon. He had the huge 63-yard touchdown pass play. That was right after Miami took the 13-12 lead on that field goal. People probably still a little bit stewing a bit about the Tyler Bass extra point at that phase in the game, but Ray Davis and that touchdown pass really got the momentum back in the Bills' favor. And then obviously they get the 2-point conversion to Keon Coleman, which kind of made up for the missed extra point. I will also say on that Ray Davis pass, and I put this on social media earlier, that was maybe an underrated, overlooked throw from Josh Allen to Ray Davis on that. Sometimes those short throws to the running backs and trying to get them in the right spot, it's a bit tricky. I liked about that throw is he led Ray Davis up the field. He didn't throw it out towards the sideline so that Ray had to kind of move towards to his right and then go upfield. He threw it upfield so Ray Davis could run up as he was catching the ball, kind of keep that head of steam. And ultimately, that's what he needed as part of that play to get in to the end zone. And so I really liked what Ray Davis did in this game. And then let me give a shout out to Khalil Shakir and Mac Hollins in this game. I thought they both had really good games. Jessica says Hollins stock big way up, so reliable for this team. He's been a bit of a polarizing figure for some. Why is he playing so much? Blah, blah, blah. Why is he doing this? Why is he being targeted? But when he was called upon in this game, he caught every one of his targets. He caught the touchdown. He made some really key third down catches, and maybe his most important catches, the 2 on the final drive. One, the set up the 3rd and 3, the 2nd and 10 play where he caught the ball for 7 yards, and then catching that first down on that play before the sequence where Tyler Bass ended up making that field goal. Matt Collins really played a solid game. And then Khalil Shakir, what can you say about him? Continues to impress after the catch, slipping away from guys. I love that Kevin Harlan used the term slippery for him, creating that extra sneaky yardage after he catches the ball. He's so good once he gets the ball in his hands and getting upfield and getting yards after catch. And he's so reliable that I think it's really incredible to watch. I do think that people have compared his stat line this year to a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I'm not saying Khalil Shakir is Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I think stylistically they are similar, and he's not far off from what a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown has been the last couple years in the NFL. That high volume, good yards after catch, sneaky ability to get extra yards. I don't think Shakir is what's the word? I don't think he's as built or sturdy maybe as an Amon-Ra, but he certainly has his own his own traits that have helped him. So obviously puts the Bills in good position, had those 13, 14-yard receptions, led the team with 6 catches, and he continues to be a really reliable target. And those wide receiver screens that maybe weren't working a year ago to a guy like Stephon Diggs are working this year to Khalil Shakir. Worked in the Seattle game, worked a bit in the Titans game, and now has worked as well in this game against the Dolphins. So really, really hats off to Shakir here. And so I feel like stock up for him as well. Stock up for me, Greg Rousseau. Uh, 3 impactful games in a row now for him. He was the best defensive lineman on the field in this game for the Bills. Had the lone Bills sack. You saw how difficult it was to get to 2 in this game. That one play early on where he kind of bobbled the ball. Rousseau was in there immediately to get that sack for the Bills. I mean, it shows you how good he has been and really how good he was in this game, because that's a split second between him getting the sack or Tua getting a clean throw off, most likely. And even he was getting throws off quickly most of the game. There were some times where he held the ball, but most of the game he was getting the ball out quickly. Rousseau with the sack, 3 tackles for loss, including that incredible play to end the game where he chases down Jalen Waddle and just looks like a giant compared to him. I mean, wow, like what an athletic play by Greg Rousseau. He's really come on. He's certainly elevated his game the last 3 weeks and has made an impact. So, Greg Rousseau, stock up for me. Another stock up for me, the dynamic duo of, and I'm kind of labeling with the dynamic duo because I feel like stylistically they play very similarly, and that's Terrell Bernard and Taron Johnson together as a duo, coming back from their injuries, coming back healthy, adding back to this defense. You can see how much of an impact these guys make when they're on the field together. Taron Johnson forcing the fumble on that play on Mostert. Terrell Bernard making a ton of plays. Maybe didn't show up as much in the box score this week as he did against Seattle a week ago, but really always around the ball, and a real fortunate situation that both of those guys have been able to come back from those injuries they had early in the year, and that those were not major injuries, and that they are back playing really well for this team. And my final stock up, I guess, for this game, and I kind of briefly talked about it, was the penalties, right? I mean, we've got 4 penalties for 40 yards in this game, 3 of which were highly, highly questionable, right? The 2 holdings and the Taylor Rapp unnecessary roughness. Don't think any 3 of those should have been penalties, and then just the one offsides. So last week against Seattle, most penalized game in the NFL so far this year. The week, 2 weeks prior to that, when they played in prime time against the Jets, 200 plus penalty yards combined for those 2 teams. So to see the Bills come away from this game, a division game, very few penalties, and the few that they did have maybe were very highly questionable. I did like to see that discipline come back. Seemed like that was an emphasis for McDermott in practice this week, and the team answered. And yeah, I'll throw Jessica's up here too. Kyer Elam seemed like a quality starter yesterday, and I thought he played pretty well. Recovered the fumble on the Taron Johnson punch out, and almost had another on the Jonnu Smith almost fumble, but his knee was down. So Kyer Elam, I did think played a good game yesterday as well. RJ says pre-snap penalties is the only penalty you can hold against a team. The rest is how the NFL wants. And I agree with that to an extent. I mean, you just never know. It's just like you hold your breath on every play that you hope that there's not a penalty on your team. And that's really what it comes down to. The pre-snap ones are definitely more black and white, and pretty obvious in most cases. But yes, I agree with RJ here that sometimes the rest of the game you just don't know. You just don't know how it's going to play out. So certainly agree with that on that one. Okay. Moving now on to our final segment of the night, the stock down section. I think some people are going to have some thoughts on this one, on the stock down. I think that this is where I'll start, right? The Bills have a problem I think, defending running backs in the passing game, and it's been a problem for most of the season, going back to last season. Obviously, last week against Kenneth Walker, they did a good job, but the Seahawks game plan got turned on its head, turned on its side very early in that game. But Brees Hall, Derrick Henry, Justice Hill, Tony Pollard 2 weeks ago. Now this week, De'Von Achane and Raheem Mostert. The Bills really, I mean, they really struggled to defend the running backs in the passing game in this one. You had Achane, uh, 8 receptions for 58 yards, Mostert 2 receptions for 32 yards. So they gave up 10 catches to the running backs for 90 yards. Um, so 9 yards, 9 yards, a pop to 9 yards a catch to the running backs in this one. There's actually only 4 running backs in the NFL right now that are averaging over 10 yards a reception at the position. That's Austin Eckler, Justice Hill, Aaron Jones, and DeAndre Swift. So to give up 9 yards a reception to running backs out of the backfield, not great. I think the Bills, as they have done against teams like the Chiefs and against teams like the Dolphins in the past, they've said, we're not going to let you beat us over the top with Tyreek and with Waddle. And I think they're okay giving up some of these smaller chunk plays to the running backs, 10, 15-yard plays, some bigger run plays. But I can understand how it's frustrating to watch the defense give up so many what appear to be easy plays to the running backs out of the backfield where there's really no one around these players. Conversely, when you see James Cook catching the ball out of the backfield yesterday, for the most part, other than maybe one play, there was a defender, in his hip pocket almost every time. So this is stylistically, I think, somewhat intentional by the Bills, but also something that I think now with Smoot down, Dwayne Carter on IR, Smoot going to IR, it makes you wonder if the Bills need to add something to this front. And also looking ahead, right, in the playoffs, this has been an area that's been an issue for the Bills, and that's stopping the run and defending running backs out of the backfield. So you wonder if it's something that they look into at the trade deadline to try to shore that up. And as RJ says, I get inviting the run so other team don't pass, but you also can give up 8 yards of play either. Yeah, I agree with that. Dolphins were over 7 yards per pass play in this game. So that's probably my first stock down. I guess my next stock down would be the third down defense. I think this third down defense continues to be a problem for this team. Happened at the end of the game, that big play to Waddle. The Dolphins were 50% on third downs. The Bills are 11th worst in the NFL. They were 11th worst in the NFL going into tonight's game. So pretty much through week 9, the Bills, the 11th worst third down defense in the NFL. And I know they've been pretty good about keeping teams out of the end zone and all of that. They did give up 27 points in this game. But I think the third down defense is going to need to tighten up a bit as you head into this tough stretch, beyond the Colts game where you're playing teams like the Chiefs, the 49ers, the Lions that are really good offenses, the Rams too. Like, I'm not going to try to count them out because they should have Kupp and Puka for that matchup against the Bills. But yeah, that third down defense still gives me a little bit of a pause as well. And as RJ says here, I still wouldn't trade resources to them for rental. The team needs to build for 20. And I think that what we've seen being due in the past at the trade deadline is we've seen him go after guys that maybe are on contracts beyond the current year. We've seen him go for guys like Rasul Douglas, who was under contract for a year beyond the year he was trading him for. We saw the Bills go after a guy like Naheem Hines a couple years ago, who was under contract for years beyond the year that he was traded for. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Bills did make a move, but it was for a guy that had term beyond the end of 2024. So I get what RJ's saying there. I kind of agree. I think the only caveat to that is if you feel like you can really get a game, like a true game wrecking type of player that could truly push you over the hump in 2024. Let's say if you get Milano back, if Smoot does come back, let's say, if Dwayne Carter comes back and you kind of fortify that line to be playoff ready, then maybe I could see them doing that. And Chase Young has 2 years left. I would be good with someone like, yeah, I mean, look, the Saints, they're in trouble right now, right? Their cap situation is bad. There's been times in the past where Chase Young's effort's been questioned. Maybe coming into the Bills organization, into that culture, changes things a bit for him. He can be a role type of player. Maybe that's an option for them. But we will see. And then I guess my final stock down, and this kind of goes a little bit in line with what I was talking about earlier with the defensive issues against defending the running backs. The interior defensive line has been struggling to get pressure this year. And I know I kind of defended Ed Oliver a few minutes ago, but statistically, analytically, this interior defensive line is not performing well in pass rushing situations this year. ProAnt put a tweet out earlier, Anthony Prohaska, out of 126 qualifying interior defensive linemen, the Bills have one player out of 4 eligible in the top 50 for pass rush productivity, which measures pressures relative to pass rush snaps. So they have not been getting that pressure up the middle, notably from a guy like Ed Oliver, who you would expect after a big year last year would be doing that. So maybe some of those inconsistencies are coming back from him, but I'm hoping that part of that is explained by the fact that he has been battling and battled back from that hamstring injury that he had from early October. Hopefully now fully getting removed from that should put him on the upswing for, the latter half of the season and as we go into this next stretch of games. So interior pressure, I think, needs to be better for the Bills going forward, and that's kind of proven out through some of the pass rush analytics from the interior. So that's my kind of final stock down for the evening. We've got the Bucks and Chiefs starting the second half right now as the Bucks are driving, trying to knock off the undefeated Chiefs, a 10-7 game at the moment. So the Bucks are right in it tonight. The Bills play the Colts next. We will have the pregame show for you on Sunday morning at 8 a.m. This show is brought to you by Picasso's and the Cover One Network. And I just want to say thank you all for bearing with me tonight. Doing these solo shows are not the easiest in the world. I appreciate all the comments coming in tonight. Interacting with you all has certainly been very enjoyable after this win. As stressful as it was, as up and down as it was, as emotional as I may have been on social media yesterday too, maybe not to the extent that others were. I do really appreciate you all joining me tonight after this W. So Steve 13th Legion says you're right up, so I don't know about that. Steve really is the glue for this show, I feel like. So he was missed tonight, but I do appreciate you the kind words, and I do appreciate all of you in the comments section. So 45 minutes, we're at 50 minutes. Good timing for this one, and I thank you all again. And until next time, go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comment section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!